Okay, so I don't know if we want to wait anymore, but I can go ahead and get started. Celeste, I don't know.
We already recording and we are in
Okay.
Facebook Live, so I think.
Okay, great. Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Page Swanson. I'm a software engineer professionally, and this is a series with the library, or continued series. This is the 4th session in a continued series with the library, teaching some fundamentals, or just some introducing some resources and some kind of new technologies you may not be familiar with for building apps, web applications and applications for the phone, for the mobile phone. So past couple of series, or the past 3 sessions, we've talked kind of about introducing different like approaches to building mobile apps. We talked about kind of setting up a local environment for building an app yourself, like all the kind of requirements you might need, software that you might want to start building your app. And then we actually got to the point where we previewed an application on our phone using some of the tools that the technology that some of the technology out there provides, called a preview. So what I'm going to be doing, first of all, I'm going to reintroduce this website to those that are new. So this is a GitHub profile. It's just a profile that I put together for this series in particular, this app building series. And it's going to host most of the resources that we're going to deal with for the duration of the series. I'm going to try to keep it up to date. As you can see, it should show hopefully the changes I just made. So it looks a little like it's not working. Let's try to refresh it and see if it will update. So anyway, I pushed out a change just recently, actually. Yeah. Where you can kind of try to follow along with the notes for this particular session, like today's session. So if you reach this page, you'll just head over to the table of contents like this. And this is kind of the record of all of the sessions we've had so far. I try to update with any other notes that I find, generally speaking, but they're dated for each of the past sessions. So today we're on session 4. So I'm going to be working off of these notes. So these are kind of like the sections that we're going to kind of work through. And then I'm making kind of like individual notes for each section. So for those that are new, that's kind of like the format of the kind of the class. Okay. Aside from that, a couple of just reminders. This main page here, this README, contains a link to my email and my office hours. I had a lot of people sign up for office hours this week and last week, so I'm really happy to see that. Please don't hesitate to sign up. You just click this link, you sign up for a block, it'll send you a Zoom link. I have them every Monday. So this session series is only every other Tuesday, but I have office hours every Monday. And you can email me anytime with any kind of questions you might have, and I'll usually get back to you like anytime during the week. Okay, but we're going to jump back in here. So again, we're on session 4. Today's the 23rd, I think.
Yeah. I just mention something really quick.
Sure.
I just want to make sure that if you guys have any questions, please just put them in the chat or in the Q&A. And I'm here to help, so we want to try to answer all the questions as much as we can. And then I wanted to share with all the participants, I'm going to be sharing some sessions that the Culverton School is promoting. 2 of them passed already, but there is one more coming up on the 24th. I believe it's tomorrow. Learn fast with cool. I'm going to share the flyers if you guys want to sign up. You're welcome and are free. So it's more about coding and having fun and learning.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds really good. I would definitely recommend checking those out. Okay. So first thing I've been trying to do is kind of like begin each session with kind of a helpful resource. I'm also going to zoom into this so we can read a bit more clearly. Okay. So I found this resource like a couple weeks ago, and I wanted to share it with people. So it's called Learn X in Y Minutes. This is like a really cool, kind of fascinating resource for learning about code. Generally speaking, it's language focused. So the idea is that maybe you know a little bit of code already, or you know about code, you know kind of how it works, but you learn about a new tool and you'd like to be able to pick up that tool relatively quickly, or at least get like a brief introduction to how the tool works. Tool or like a programming language. This website supports a ton of existing tools and programming languages. It's very, very useful. And you can kind of search a variety of different languages like C# or like JavaScript. And you can see they kind of provide these like little guides. They're very short guides on and pretty thorough introductions to like a programming language. So I was going to recommend this one in particular, this JavaScript kind of introduction. This one is actually on the longer side, but I still really like it because it follows it up with all of these really nice resources for like learning JavaScript. I think one for complete beginners to programming entirely, might be interested in the Python guide. The Python guide in particular is super beginner friendly. And again, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, they're also going to provide you with like just a bunch of free online resources. So this is a really good tool for, you know, you learned about a language and you want to check it out. So I'd highly recommend it. Okay, so we have been kind of like setting up local development environments in the past sessions. We've talked about kind of looking around at some of the template application code that we set up using NativeScript, which is the platform that we're kind of working with to build our like mobile app. And so something I wanted to introduce before we get a lot further, even just briefly, is this technology, GitHub. So we're on GitHub right now, the website. And GitHub is a really effective tool for managing code, managing source code, meaning the source of like an application or a program, the source code for that. So what I wanted to do is just very briefly kind of take a look at this resource. It's just a cheat sheet for using Git. Git is the kind of tool or the technology for managing source code, your code on your computer, but also in what's called like a remote repository. So usually with Git, though you can manage code locally, and when I say locally, I mean like on your personal computer, you can also use Git as a way to connect with a remote service or an online service for hosting code, similar to GitHub. So GitHub is a service that you can use to store source code. So if I zoom out here, oops, and I go back to this project, this is my user on GitHub, and this is my project that I created. It's called a repository. And this repository contains, it doesn't actually contain code right now, it just contains these session files, but we're going to be adding some code today. We're going to be adding the code from the template project that you set up with NativeScript, which I talked about in the last session. So, so just taking a kind of like a glance at this, you can see there's like, you know, just like a folder structure, kind of like how you would look at like a file explorer on your computer. But you also see there's like these messages here. So these notes like update session notes and dates, and you can see these timestamps or like times which like changes were made. That's kind of the whole point of using something like GitHub and using Git. The idea is that if I just, and let's go ahead and actually, I'm going to share my whole computer here. I was just sharing my browser. So let me just share the whole desktop so you can kind of see what I'm taking a look at. So if I open my file explorer here, okay, and I go to the place where I'm keeping my repository. So you can see this kind of mirrors this remote online location here. So I have this file, license file, readme file, and table of contents file. You notice I actually have an additional folder here called simple app. This is the template app with all of my app code that I've been talking about, but that's not updated here. And the reason is because I haven't used Git yet to submit this content. But one thing that's missing on my local copy of all of these files is if I make a change to any of these files, all I can see from my file explorer is the day that the last change was made or the time where the last change was made, but I don't know like what changed. And I don't know, for instance, how different the file is now compared with like, say, a week ago or 2 weeks ago. What if I create a problem with my code and I want to go back a few steps? I want to go back a few changes that I made to kind of figure out what's wrong and start a couple of steps previous. I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't use this kind of source control tool. So what I wanted to do is kind of walk through a couple of just very simple steps for getting started with source control. This cheat sheet, if you follow it for your project, you'll kind of get where you need to be, I think. Just keep in mind that your project doesn't have to look anything like my project here. So I'll go back into it and I'll just kind of keep this up. Your project doesn't have to look anything like this. It can be any type of file. It can be Python code. It can be JavaScript. It can be anything. But you can follow these sort of steps and set up a Git repository. It even, I think, shows you how to, I think it even shows you how to install Git. Yeah, right here. But you can also download it instead of using like this command. So just to show you how to set up an installation for the tool, but we're going to kind of start from here. So after we've created a project using Git, this is all happening sort of like on our computer. We can use Git to basically make changes going forward and track them whenever we have updates to the code that we've been working on. So I'm going to open up in conjunction here. I'm going to open up this program that I introduced last session called Visual Studio Code. This is a code editor. It's an editor program. It's going to let me open that same folder you just saw, except it's going to let me open it and it's going to give me like a nice view of all of the code that I'm currently working on. But the other thing it's going to do is it's actually going to immediately work with Git kind of like out of the box. So if you have Git installed and then you install this Visual Studio Code editor, you can see changes that you're making and kind of commit them and update your code using Git all within this project. So what this is showing me right now actually is that I have changes to be made for my application, for my code folder. The way that I can tell that I have changes, besides the fact that it's telling me I have like these 85 files that are haven't been changed is if I go over to GitHub, which is where I'm actually sending these code changes, I can see that like I'm missing a folder here. So if I take a look at this folder, simple app, it's not present in this view. So I know that that's missing. And if I go back to this application, Visual Studio Code here, it's going to tell me the same thing. It's going to have this little indicator here saying like, hey, this is a new folder. And if I take a look over here on the left side, it says source control. And I click this, it shows I have all of these changes. I don't usually use Git this way. I usually use the terminal. So the terminal looks like this. If you're on Windows, you can use the tool that you download with this link here. So if you scroll down on this cheat sheet, there's this installation set of instructions here. If you click downloads, it'll take you to a tool that you can download that's all kind of self-contained, and you can just use that tool to use Git. But either on Windows or on Mac, like I'm on, you'd be able to use Visual Studio Code to kind of make these changes. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm actually just going to submit, I'm going to submit these changes that I have on my computer. You don't need to worry about the content of these changes. And in fact, maybe it would be a little bit easier for us to visualize just a very simple change. So what I'm going to do is add just a basic file. So I just clicked add up here in my Visual Studio Code editor. And I'm just going to say test.txt. This is just a text file. And I'm just going to make an edit, and I'm going to save it. Okay, so now you see here, previously it said 85 changes. Now it's saying there's 86. So if I go to this change drop down here, you can see that previously, this file wasn't here, and now it's suggesting that I add the file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this plus button here. And when I do that, I should be able to just close this changes view and just look at staged changes. Staged changes means like these are changes that I'm getting ready to submit as like a final kind of commit, it might be called, or a final submission for what I want to actually change. You can see also, if I go back to the file view and I make another change, so just some nonsense, you'll see that the change comes up again. So if I add it again here, it'll just get updated. So the file didn't exist before. It's just going to update the changes that I'm going to make to be consistent with what I have on my computer. I know this might be like I think I might be moving a little bit fast, but hopefully with the recording, you can kind of maybe review some of this if you want to step through it on your own. I just knew we kind of have like limited time. So I just kind of want to get you used to this idea of like updating code and using Git. One thing in particular, which I'll try to loop back to, I didn't really show how to set up a project like this using GitHub, but I'll connect it back to GitHub in a second. So I'm just going to show how to finish this kind of commit here in Visual Studio Code, which is this program we're using. So now that we have these stage changes, we can actually we can complete a commit. So the commit consists of basically the changes that we're proposing that we're satisfied with. We can enter a message saying like adding a sample file, or maybe like adding a nonsense file, since it's not really a helpful file. If we like our message, we can click commit here, and it'll go ahead and make the commit for that file. Okay, so that doesn't mean a whole lot. because we can't really see like what happened with that commit yet. If I go back over to my website here, so this code's supposed to show up here if I make a change, but it hasn't. We don't see our new file. That's because we have to do one final step, which is to push any outstanding changes. There's kind of a quick way to do this. In Visual Studio Code, it's to use this kind of quick control here. So at the bottom left, it's going to basically let me push out any outstanding changes or updates. And it's going to pull, meaning like it's going to refresh my computer, like the folders on my computer, to be up to date with what I have on the GitHub page. This is, I think this is fine to do this. When you work with a bunch of other people, maybe on the same folders, like you're collaborating, it could be a little bit harder to manage that. But I think this function's fine. I don't see a problem with doing this. So that was successful. So now it's saying we pushed. There's no more pending changes to be made. And it's just checking if I'd like to periodically run this fetch command. It just means, do you want me to check for updates regularly? So I'm going to say no for now, because I don't really need that. So we still have outstanding changes, but our text file change is not here anymore. Let's check the website. And if we check, we see that there's this update here. So we successfully updated our repository. So I think the kind of part that is missing here is like, how did we get to this repository in the first place? So I think I kind of left that part out, which might be a little bit confusing. The easiest way to do that is, I think, through GitHub. GitHub makes it really easy to do this. Once you install Git, I already have it installed on my computer, but it's a pretty simple installation process. It's not too complicated. And you install something like Visual Studio Code. It's relatively straightforward. But what we can do really quick is I can just say, I go to my profile. I can go to repositories. I can click right here. I can click new. And when you click new, it's basically going to walk you through a couple of things. You can say whether this should be a public, project or a public code project. You can give it a name and description and everything like that. And at that point, I'm not going to make one right now because we have a perfectly good one to kind of emulate with. But once you've created the repository, you'll get something that looks a lot like this. You just won't have the same files. At which point, all you have to do is you get this link. Okay, this link is a unique link specifically to your repository, to your code source online. If you copy this, you can either use the terminal, the Git program that you downloaded, or again, you can use something like Visual Studio Code, which I have installed. And what you can do is you can open, I want to say you'd start from, let's try closing this folder. I think what we're going to be able to do, yeah. So it's going to give us an option when we get started with the program to actually clone a repository. And if you remember, I'm going to go back to the web browser here. You can see here, it's giving me a clone link. So I'm going to copy this link. And I can actually clone my own repository again. That's no problem. If I paste that here, it's going to let me clone it. And it's going to ask me where I'd like to clone it. I'll actually just clone it. Let's see. Well, I can't make it. If I clone it here, it'll just overwrite it. So I don't know if I want to do that. But I can say new folder. So untitled. This doesn't matter too much. So I'm going to actually clone it right here. Okay, and I can then open it. And what we should see is exactly the same code that we were just working with. So the same directory content, everything. So that's like kind of, I kind of give you the from finish to start, but hopefully it's somewhat clear about how you might make a change using specifically an application like Visual Studio Code. To kind of mix things up a little bit for upcoming changes, like in this particular session, I'm going to use the terminal so you can kind of see what that looks like. I won't go as deep into the terminal kind of explanation, just because this cheat sheet does a good job of doing that. You can see here, there's a variety of commands that it's going to explain to you if you want to set up a repository and then start committing to it. This day-to-day work section is really helpful because these are basically all the commands that you would need to get get started. Okay, so I'm going to close this. I know we spent a lot of time talking about Git, but I think it's a really useful tool. I don't think you should do a project without it, really, because part of working on projects like this is, getting them out in the open so that other people can look at your code and can maybe give you feedback, and it gives you the opportunity to share your code with other people. So I talked about this. I talked about how we can use Git, talked about GitHub, like this website in particular. And there's also tutorials on how to create a GitHub repository on GitHub itself. I think if you just go to the GitHub site, I want to say, well, if you're not logged in, it might give you a more step-by-step tutorial. If I find that, I will include it as a link here so that if you're looking back, you can go ahead. I wanted to make a couple more comments on GitHub here, specifically because over the weekend and this past week, I was looking at like different projects on GitHub. And as a new developer, I think it's kind of hard to basically decide, okay, I'm getting started working with code. I don't have a lot of experience looking at projects. How do I know, what projects are worth my time? How do I know what's worth looking at? I don't want to necessarily use my project as an example, but if we take a look at my project, and maybe it's not actually best to look at this because you don't have a lot of context for how would you get to this project in the first place. So let's maybe do a Google search. So what we can do is we can do a search for maybe like a common project that people might be interested in looking at. So maybe we can think of a project like, I always think of, maybe something really big that everyone's kind of heard of, I don't know, like WhatsApp. So WhatsApp is like a chat application, and it looks like they actually have a GitHub project. So that's good. We can kind of make use of that as an example here. So this is like the WhatsApp sort of GitHub page. That means like basically the WhatsApp creators, the creators of this application, they have a GitHub page. They have code that they want to share publicly with other people. And they have some other repositories here too. These repositories, it looks like these projects have all kinds of different things that they have to sort of offer here. But let's take a look at this one because it's the most recent one. So it's something to do with Erlang, which is a programming language. It looks like it helps you format your code. So make your code easier to read, makes your code more legible for other developers. That's great. So it sounds like a great project. So I wanted to kind of give you a quick idea of like how I judge projects like this, mainly so that you can kind of like not protect yourself, but just be aware of, how you can make the best use of a project and whether a project should be considered like as a valuable resource for you. So a couple of things I want to note. Do they have a website for the project? So on GitHub, you can quickly look at someone's website. Usually it should be on the right-hand side if they're going to provide it, but you can also check out the README. So a README file is an MD file, a markdown file that GitHub will automatically kind of interpret for you or load for you in this nice kind of like very sort of like legible format. So it has all these headings and it has lists. You can do that sort of thing with a README file. And typically you'd prefer a project that has a README file because it will give you explanations or indications about, like how the project should be used and what the project does and its purpose. This README file is very verbose. So this is a really good sign. It means the developers actually care about the project that they're supporting. And they want to give you as much kind of value, and they want to give you as much sort of like documentation on what the point of the project is. So to me, this is like a really good sign. They don't have a website, it seems, for this project. So they don't have like a custom web page just for this project. That's okay. I think this README more than like makes up for that. But that's something that you might want to see, because it means that, again, like the developers have put a lot of time into the project. They put a lot of investment in the code. So this stuff is where we get into the kind of Git kind of cooperation, or like the Git integration with GitHub. So GitHub is a place where you can host code using Git. Git is the tool you use to track your code. Just a little bit ago, we made a commit earlier. We made a change to a file and we committed it. So a commit is like a transaction. A commit is like a submission to your Git repository. When I say, last commit, I'm saying like, when was the last commit? When was the last time someone actually made a change to this repository? This information can be found like right here. You can see the timestamps similar to like the way my repository was kind of indicating like when I changed things. You can see that there was a commit at least 2 days ago. This is also like a really good sign. It means like developers are actively working on the project, which is always a good sign. You can click the commit and you can kind of see what changes were made. I like to look at this view in particular. This lets you see all the commits that have been made basically in the past, like for all of history. This repository in particular like looks really active, so that's a good sign. I would based off of these kind of things we've been through so far, just these three, these are specifically the README and the commit dates. These are good indicators that this is probably like a good resource to use for you, no matter what kind of project you're working on. The last two things I wanted to mention are open issues and pull requests. So if you look at the top here, these two tabs, you can see issues and you can see pull requests. Issues are exactly what they sound like. So people, anyone, yourself included, you can submit an issue to a repository. And you can say, hey, like I found a problem with this code. Let's look at this issue in particular. Trying to see one that makes, okay, so this is like I think a pretty clear issue. This person wrote a lot about this issue in particular. They tried to give an example. What you're looking for when you're kind of evaluating whether a project is a good project that you might want to take advantage of is how many people respond to the issue. Is it like a pretty active forum for discussion about issues that are in progress? Are the developers, like the people that actually work on the project, so like a contributor, are they commenting on the issues? Because they're the ones that might actually address the issue in the first place. Is there activity like around the issue? This is a good sign. If there are, first of all, a few issues, because that means people are actually using the code, but also there's not too many open. So you can see there's only like 14 current like issues, but a lot of them have been closed. And it looks like they've even been closed recently. So that's also a really good sign. It means they actually care about like the issues with the code. The last thing that you'd want to look at is pull requests. Pull requests are basically opportunities for other contributors. So people that did not create the project, they're not the developer, like the primary developers on the project. They're not the owners of the project. This is an opportunity for other developers to make contribution to the project by submitting what's called a pull request, which just means I took your project and I actually made some code changes to it. I would like to submit them for your review. So I'd like to submit my code for you to take a look at it and see if you'd like to include it in your project. These are a really good sign too. It means that other people care about the project enough to work on it. You can see here, there's been a lot of pull requests to this particular project, and a lot of them have been merged, meaning like they accepted the changes. So overall, I would say this is like a great project. In this case, it's, for Erlang, we're not doing anything with Erlang in these sessions, but that's totally fine. If you maybe were interested in Erlang or something, I don't even necessarily know everything about this project, but I can already say it's probably a great project to kind of use as a reference. So I just wanted to kind of give that guide because I've found myself in the past sometimes coming across projects only to find out maybe that they haven't been updated in years, or they're just not very active, and that can create problems down the line. Okay, so I wanted to use the rest of the time, now that we've kind of introduced a little bit about Git and GitHub. And again, feel free to just, if any of that was like confusing or you felt a little bit lost, I'm really just trying to give a crash course on some of this stuff because I know maybe some people haven't ever heard of these kinds of things before. And I just kind of want to expose you to it and hopefully give you some resources that you can use to kind of like get started on your own. Okay, so we're going to kind of jump back to our project in particular, our app project. So to kind of like revisit things, in the past couple of sessions, we've been settling into using Vue with NativeScript as our kind of technology of choice for building our application. So for those that are new or for like kind of a refresher, NativeScript is, well, actually, I won't spend too much time on that because I'll just kind of forward you to this page here. So in the past couple of sessions, we bookmarked these links. You can take a look at the old table of contents if you want to find these links. But this is the intro page, the kind of landing page for NativeScript Vue. This gives a really good description for what NativeScript is. So it helps you build apps using JavaScript. And Vue is a framework, so a set of tools, a set of code resources that make interfacing or interacting with complex code a lot more accessible, makes it a lot easier. Kind of goes into some justifications about why we would want to do this, but I kind of tried to summarize some of these things to kind of explain why, or to demonstrate why we would want to use Vue in particular. So NativeScript is one technology, like it kind of suggests here, and Vue is another technology. Vue is a technology that's like used in web apps, generally speaking. NativeScript is for producing mobile apps using web code. You might wonder if you know a little bit more about NativeScript in general. We're coding with JavaScript. Like, why would we use NativeScript, or why would we use Vue with NativeScript? Why not just use plain old JavaScript? Like if we go to the NativeScript website, so just nativescript.org, if we go to this web page, it presents a couple of different options for us. So it presents us with an option for something called Angular, Vue, and we could also just use JavaScript or TypeScript, which is a kind of a variety of JavaScript, or what's called a superset of JavaScript, and CSS. So these would just be standard web technologies, nothing fancy. And it gives us an opportunity to like check out some sample apps. These would be like some sample, we would click templates here, and we could see some like different templates that are just using JavaScript if we wanted to. So this would just be a basic JavaScript template for using like just JavaScript, just CSS, very core web technology. So when I was first thinking about like what kind of app we were going to build in this series, and by the way, I haven't been looking at the chat. I'll try to check in. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to check in and make sure no one needed anything in the chat. But just a reminder, if you have any questions at all, feel free to stop me if we need to slow down or anything like that. So these are just going to show you some like templates that you could use to start building an app. And we're in fact going to be taking a look at a really simple Vue template. So the question is, why would we use Vue rather than just using basic JavaScript? My kind of summary of this would be to kind of take a look at the playground site that we encountered in some of the previous sections and kind of flip between, for yourself, flip between using the just NativeScript and JavaScript templates and the NativeScript and Vue templates. This is the Vue template in particular. Okay, so this template has a couple of pretty basic components or pieces here. And if we switch to the NativeScript and JavaScript template, I just kind of wanted to point out some of the major differences. It might even be better. Let me open another tab. And we can kind of compare them directly. So we can kind of see, you can also generate these templates on your computer. You can also just download them. I'm just kind of showing them on the Playground website because it's convenient. So if we take a look at the Vue code here, there's a couple of sort of core differences. First of all, for me, the Vue code, the JavaScript code has a distributed code structure to it. So this is the Vue. We're using Vue. You can see this V here, and I just selected NS plus Vue.js. And this is the JavaScript. So you can see it's JS here. So the JavaScript structure, the file structure, I'm going to like kind of move this out so we can compare it directly. The JavaScript file structure is far more distributed. Like there's a lot more going on. Let me do this so I can, oh, let's see. Maybe we can do this. Okay, that's a little bit better. So the JavaScript file structure, like the folder structure, these are all the kind of pieces of code, pieces of information that we're going to need to build our application. It's a lot more distributed. So things are more spread out. We need a piece of JavaScript for the home page. We need, this is required for, this is the template that's required to basically load all of the content for our app. So you can see there's just going to be some text content here in our app. And then we need this view model, which is basically going to relate the user interface, like the kind of the way that we're going to interact with the app as a user. It's going to relate this to the code inside of our home page. This would be a script here. So this script is going to contain anything that we would want to add to our app, like functionally. So let's say we wanted to add a button to the home page, or we want to add some other kind of like functionality, like maybe a date selector or something like a calendar. We would need to do that here. And then that gets related to, again, what's called the view model, which we then load inside of this, this app root file here. So you can see home page. Okay, so that's referencing this here. Okay, so I think this structure is like kind of a little bit too distributed. And it's sort of hard for me to keep my head around the structure of the application as a whole. So that's kind of one of my big caveats with using just JavaScript. But one thing I would mention in particular is that there are going to be fewer dependencies with just using JavaScript in general. Namely, Vue in particular is like, it's a special, so you can see here, import Vue from native script Vue. This is a dependency that we're having to add to our project, file, so that we can use Vue as a tool. I think this in particular is kind of like just kind of something that we have to accept when we use kind of additional technologies and functionality. We're going to have to add more dependencies. We just need more things for our project to work. But if you notice, the project structure is far simpler. So we still have this app.js. This is like the main entry point for the app. So you can kind of imagine this represents the app. Like this is your app. And then we're including all of the little pieces of the app that we need. So here we're including this app root module, which is right here. And this is going to include the homepage. For the Vue app, I think things are actually a lot clearer. So in the app.js for the Vue app, we have a very clear statement that says to import hello world from this folder. Okay, and if we go to that folder, it's very obvious. We have a hello world.vue file, which represents this part of our application. So this particular part, it's called hello world. It doesn't matter what you call it in particular, but it's a single organized little piece of functionality that we can kind of mess with and play with, which given the limited amount of time, I hope I can get to kind of like show you this on my computer. But I thought it was important to kind of revisit the structure of the applications that we're working with, the code structure, in comparison to just the JavaScript, because I think the Vue, although it adds another layer of understanding, what's the difference between Vue and just JavaScript, which I'll try to kind of explain as we go along, as we work further on this app. I think it's just very important to kind of make these comparisons for yourself, make these judgments, and see what comes easier for you to understand, whether you understand just the basic sort of, or not basic, but plain JavaScript that's happening here versus something that's a little more abstract happening here. If you're a complete beginner though, maybe it doesn't really make a big difference. And I still think this is just easier to look at. So that's kind of why I wanted to go with this structure for these sessions. So I kind of have some more notes here. So what I wanted to do is, jumping off of the last session with these last few minutes, I don't think I'll get to all of this stuff, but that's okay. I was thinking we might get to this stuff next time anyway. Really what I wanted to get to today is breaking down the project structure so that when you set up the template for yourself, you can really dig into the pieces of code that make up the template, and you can kind of understand like what each piece represents. So I'm going to go back to this docs page, this introduction page, and this is where we are right now. So we're going to investigate our project. When I say project, I'm talking about a template app. I'm going to set that up really quick, following the instructions that we already went through last session, but I'm just going to jump straight to this part. So if you follow through the instructions from last session, you should be able to get to this point where you can set up a template. I'm just going to do this part really quick so that I get a fresh template. I'll actually, I don't know. I think it might be more helpful for me to use Visual Studio Code, because no matter if you're on Windows or not, you should be able to use this. Okay, so I'm actually going to close this folder because this was the repository that I cloned. that I already have on my computer. So I'm just going to open that. Okay, I jump over here to documents. This is the one we cloned. This is the one I already have. Then we go here. Now you notice from before, right, it's going to load all those changes. It's going to say that I have a bunch of changes. I'm going to delete this because we don't need this. And it's taking a second to refresh all the changes from Git. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Visual Studio Code and I'm going to open a terminal. Okay, this is going to give me command line tools, and it's going to let me run commands like the ones listed here. So I'm going to copy this command. I have already done this like previously. I don't need to reinstall these two items. But if you get to this point, you'll look back at the session 3 notes and hopefully you can kind of get to this point. But we're just setting up all the things that we need to use Vue with native script on our computer. So I'm going to paste this command. Whoops. Oh, it did. Okay. So pasted. And I'm going to replace this last part with the name of our project. I called the last one I did simple app. So let's just call this another simple app. Okay. So this is going to set up a template. It's going to download it. It's going to prompt me to do some things. Do I like the name of the project? Is the description okay? The app name, I'm going to say another simple app. That's okay. All of this stuff is okay. We're going to use JavaScript as our base layer, as opposed to TypeScript. And we're just going to, again, we're going to keep it very simple. We're not going to install Vuex, and we're not going to install the dev tools for now. This is just a color scheme. We don't need a color scheme for now. And then it's going to tell us to CD, meaning change directory, to that project. So we're going to jump in there. And this is really the last thing I wanted to talk about. So like basically kind of give a tour of, and I just did a bunch of commands there. In particular, I did this ls command, which means to list. So it's going to list everything inside of the directory. So these are all the files in there. And then I did this clear, which just clears out all of those commands. But we don't have to look at the content in here anymore. I just needed to run these commands to set up the template. Oh, and by the way, I need to run one last command. This here is basically going to grab all of those dependencies that we talked about. It's going to grab all of the things that we need for our project to successfully run as an app. We can do that in the background, though. We don't have to actually like pay attention to this. And we can open up this project structure here. So if I click on this inside of Visual Studio Code, I can see all of the files inside of this folder. So these are all of the files that come as a result of us setting up the template and so far running npm install. This is going to add some more things. It's going to add them. I think we're going to see some more things get added in a second here, or maybe if I click refresh. Okay, yeah, it added this other folder. So let's kind of take a look at our notes, and we can go with the last minute or so. You know, that's okay. We kind of ran out of some time. We can get to this stuff next week because it all kind of goes together. This is going to be basically styling our app and kind of getting a look and feel for our app that we like before we add like navigation and things like that. We can kind of figure some of that stuff out. But I'll just use the last minute to kind of go through the folder structure here. So like I said, when you run these initialization commands, it's going to basically plop this folder in your lap, and you're going to be set up with all of these different items in the folder named for the project identifier that you picked. So I picked another simple app and it made this folder. So the first folder listed here is app resources. So app resources is a folder that's going to get created. It'll help you configure different settings and different specifications for building the app for the mobile device target that you're interested in, like creating an app for. So, and I hope it's okay with people. I'm probably going to go over like maybe 1 or 2 minutes. Feel free either to stop me if you have a question before the session ends, or if you just want a clarification or something like that. But hoping that we can just kind of quickly kind of go through some of these so that you can reference it later, reference the recording. But feel free to leave if you need to. That's totally fine. Okay, so you can see here, there's 2 folders in here, Android and iOS. So these are going to be Android specific settings. The Android manifest is going to contain stuff specific to the Android app that we'll eventually produce if we want to produce an Android app. And similarly, we have one for iOS, which looks a little bit different because they're different kinds of apps. So we go back to our notes here. We have a node modules folder. We have a package lock.json. So these 2 things kind of go together, the node modules, okay, and the package lock.json. The node modules are all the dependencies I talked about. So if you look in here, you'll see a ton of stuff. See some things you might recognize like native script. I don't know why this is in here because we don't need Angular, we're using Vue. But you can also see Vue in here. So we need all of these things for our app to come together successfully. Node modules is grayed out because when you create a project, we also get this git ignore file, which automatically adds things that we probably want to ignore when we submit code changes for our project using Git. So we probably don't want to commit anything like this or send anything like this to our project, just because this stuff isn't necessary. This stuff isn't necessary to commit. Like, no one looking at your project needs to see all of the dependencies, all of the content that's included for these dependencies. They just need to know what dependencies you require, which is this package lock file. So package lock.json is going to be committed. You can see it's green. And that's because it lists every, oh, sorry, that's package.json. That's a little bit different. Package lock is going to list literally every single dependency that's required for the app. This is really useful for debugging your app or sharing it with someone else. If they want to try to build your app on their computer, they know exactly what dependencies they need, and they know which ones you used, so they can kind of replicate the same behavior. The package.json is a bit different. It looks similar. It's also a JSON file, but the difference is that this JSON file is specifically for your project. So if you wanted to package your project and let someone else include it, you would basically provide this file, indicating sort of the core dependencies for the project code, aside from all of these various dependencies. It's okay if the dependencies aren't super clear right now, but I'm just trying to kind of give you some advice on like what they kind of represent. Hopping around here, the meat of the project. So like none of this really is specific to our app. Like none of this stuff, like you would need any of this stuff for any kind of app built with native script. But like, where do we find the code that's particular to our app? Oh, it also, by the way, as a last thing, this is the Readme file. So I already talked a little bit about Readmes, but you get one automatically generated for the app that you create. This is really cool because you can go ahead and start editing this, and you can list kind of specific information and documentation for your app. If we jump in here though, this is kind of the meat of your application in particular. And I think I can, well, I was hoping I could kind of just show this view, because it's kind of annoying seeing all the surrounding folders, but that's okay. So this is the source folder. This is the source code. So it's called source because because of the source code that the folder contains. This is the code for our particular app. So it's going to contain actually something that looks very similar to the template that we pulled up, we loaded on the native script playground. So it's got a components folder. The component in this case is just called app.view. You can name that whatever you want. You can change the name. You just need to remember to update the name in other places that it's referenced in the source code. We have a main.js. So this is the app.js in the playground example. It's got a reference to the app component. This is the component here. And this is the reference to it. So this is basically saying, the first thing I want you to do when the app gets started is to load up this component and put it into a frame. We'll learn a little bit more about frames next time when we start figuring out layout, the layout code for our component. But this is basically the first thing that happens, right? So it's a start. So pull the app component in, this one. I don't know why, I'm sorry about that. Let me show you. It's full screen. So pull the app component in, load it up and start. And this is where it's going to grab the dependencies that it needs to run the app. So we need native script view in particular. We need that variety of view to get this part of our code. And then we need the app that we just referenced here. So you can see this all kind of traces back, right? So we're referencing app. App is in components and then app. So we can see that here. Fonts, you can store in here, you can store custom fonts. So if you want custom fonts for your app, this is where you put those. App.css, this is going to be the styling that we'll probably talk more about next time for all of your apps. So all of the different components will use the styles from this file. And we'll talk a little bit more about style rules and how to build a style sheet next time. And I think, oh yeah, assets and images. So if you want to load images with your app and you want to show images inside of your app, outside of just like loading someone's photos, you can store them here. You could also store icons, custom graphics, anything like that. And I think that pretty much covers everything that I wanted to talk about as far as the app structure. You can kind of take a look through here to kind of review any of this stuff. Next time, we'll talk about the appearance of our app and we'll actually load it up on the phone like we did last week and start making our own custom changes, and we'll be that much closer to kind of having our very own app. But hopefully this kind of gave you a more in-depth tour of the code, the template. Maybe you started playing around with the template, but you didn't really understand what was going on in there. Hopefully this kind of gave you a better idea of like what was happening. Okay, but that's, sorry to go over, that's kind of all I have. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer anything. Just remember, you can get to this website just by going to Library App Starter, add my GitHub, and you can see all of the notes that I've uploaded here. And I'll also go ahead and upload a sample project if you're just curious to kind of get started, maybe looking at an existing template. Yeah, so that's it. I hope that was at least somewhat informative, maybe learn something new. Next time we'll talk about styling and our app layout. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you, Paige. Was really, really good.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. Yeah, is there anything you needed